Okay, so the first thing that we want to look at today is the testing capabilities. So how to basically unit test neoan3 components, and for that we are first of all going to actually start a new project here, right? So neoan3 new app, and while this is installing, let's think about like why or what testing levels we basically want, right? So first will be the unit test, and then later on we want to have a continuous integration to basically have some kind of a branching logic for our before we go to end-to-end testing. And so this is the regular we already installed the project now, as you can see. So they're just like the composer packages that are now loaded, and this is pretty much the let's wait until this is done. Pretty much the neoan3 as it comes. I'm gonna have a quick look at that as soon as it's done. Takes a little bit longer to install the testing suite here. So they uses PHP Unit, so basically the standard. It may take a little while. Should be done in a second. So sometimes Composer runs faster, sometimes slower. I really haven't figured out why. Might be also the internet. Okay, meanwhile, let's kind of have a look at what I'm planning to do here. So I prepared Postman that I connected with my, not connected with, but downloaded basically the Postman, what's it called? Agent, right? So we don't have any kind of CORS issues. Pretty useful. So they kind of changed it relatively recently, that you basically do everything web-based and just have a small client tool that install locally. If you're not familiar with Postman, that's how you can basically test and build APIs. It's pretty useful. So that's basically what we're going to do, right? Is work like kind of like non-visual. This is still going through here. Man, that takes a while today. It's probably because it's indexing at the same time. Kind of RAM issue. Come on. Yeah, come on. This thing gets stuck. Oh yeah, it did. Okay. Wow, okay. All right. So that took us a while, right? Okay. So what is going on with the terminal? Let's create a new one, I guess. Okay. So first thing we probably want to do is to kind of have a look at it. See what's going on here. Okay. So we're running version 2.10, and basically the first thing that I want to do is, and I'm going to do that all with the CLI tool, create a new test homepage, right? So neoan3 new component, let's call it home, and it's going to be a route. Yep, I only have that one. Okay, and then I want to have this as the home page. Set default controller home, and this is just something you don't have to do it that way, right? You can also open up the default PHP and kind of like manually do that, but you can run this command and you'll be fine. So if I reload this, then okay, so now I'm at home. Perfect. So what I want to do now is to basically look into like how testing works, right? So since I'm building an API and potentially not building the front end, let's see what I want to do. So I am assuming that there is something that I will call post, right? So I'm going to say new component, posts. That's going to be a type API, and we'll have the frame demo. Okay, so what will happen now, right, is there should be available now the API v1, and then what did we say, posts. Okay, as you can see, it says error request is empty, which is fine, right? Some value. Okay, so let's first of all look at how that looks like. So in our posts, all right, so a little bit of introduction maybe in case you're not familiar with neoan3 too much. So posts is basically the controller we're running. It extends demo, that's the frame we chose. And then we say, okay, there's a get method, so get posts. It intakes params, and this is like I actually want to quickly switch to PHP 7 even. Nope. Where are my languages? Where are my languages? Here. 7.4. Okay. Don't know why that defaults to 5.6. With my parameters, and that's the error that I got, right? So let's actually look at this. So that's the GET request, right? So you can see API v1, and actually let's directly do that with Postman. So I'm going to just copy this over and paste that here. Okay, and here you can see text sum. I'm gonna make this a little bigger. Oh no, that's a search function. Okay. So what's happening here, right? So as you can see, let's go over here maybe. This is required at this point. So if I have one params array, so let's just see, I'll leave this away, right? Then this will actually throw a here 400 beta request, because this is apparently required, right? So if I say, hey, this is optional, let's just say, well, it defaults to an empty array, right? Then you can see it works just fine, and I returned the empty array in that case. Okay. Same goes for post, but let's focus on get for now. Now, if I want to basically say, well, there's more to that, right? So I might have an ID, which can be null, and probably this wants it in doc blocks. Sure, fair enough. where I can basically say, well, what is this ID? So that's optional, same thing, right? So I can basically say, all right, if ID, then return, let's just say ID, let's just fake some kind of database result here, and content, some text, right? So as you can see, so this didn't change, right? This is still empty. So the endpoint here assumes that, well, there are params or not, right? Which would be the last parameter here. Or I can of course say, well, what if I do 5? Right? And then you can see now this ID is set, right? This is the route, so we're going to go into here and say ID content and then some text. ID 5, right? I'm going to probably do something like this. Cast it. Makes a little bit more sense. Okay. And otherwise, I will return the parameters. So far, so good. So far, so good. And I guess that's all we need to do for now. So the post is something that we're going to ignore. Let's just say this has no post for now. We're only going to be concerned with the get. And now we basically say, let's get into testing. So what I'm going to do is neoan3 has a completely automated testing infrastructure, right? So if I start to say, hey, neoan3 new test, and I say component posts, then we will find a new file here in component posts that is post test. Now, as you can see, for your convenience, this is already generated. See, already understood, like, yeah, okay, there's a get post, and what the setup function is, you know, for the unit testing, and basically already does everything. Now, what we want to do in our case, right, since we have a little bit of something, is to basically say, okay, test get posts by ID. Let's call it like this. And then here we say, actually, before we do this, let me kind of copy this here. Post params. Okay, I mean, this makes very little sense from a programmatic standpoint. But let's just say, for now, we're going to say, okay, we're going to do exactly that. So we're going to test if this really works. So I'm going to give this 5 and say, okay, see if that's an array. And if the array has the key ID, right? So if it has this one, we want to know. And we also want to say that the in that case, response content is some text, right? Let's just assume that that's the case. And since we want to be a little bit more interesting here, oh no, actually that's fine. That is fine. Okay, and then we test the possibility to basically say, how about that one, right? So if we had here some value, would still go in the same, right? So we don't expect that one, but if we got rid of the ID, then we would run into this scenario, right? So in actuality, we have 3 different scenarios. So here's our params only, right? So note how I just don't set anything, right, when I actually use it. But here, if I'm testing it, I will give the ID a distinct value of null, just so it's set because of the way the function is invoked. And here say sum equals value. Oh yeah, that's already correct. Yeah, I don't think I need to change anything here, so that should work. right? I'm asserting that the response is an array, and I'm, oh, by the way, so what you see here, that it's a JSON at after the API actually responds, so at a higher level, right there, it responds as a JSON object, but for PHP internally, it's basically kept as an array until the point of giving it over with a 200. So I'm asserting that the response is an array, and that we have a key sum, and that the sum has the value, right? So that's all fine and dandy, and basically let's test that and see what's going to happen. So the way the testing environment works, I mean, my IDE does a lot of things extra for me, but I don't really have to. So all the tests that go into, or actually let's just run it. Just run it and have a look at this. So the only thing I'm doing is on the root level, I'm going to say neoan3 test. And what I will see then is that everything is okay. There are 19 assertions. Well, because there are all kinds of different things in here, but let's see. So no errors, we seem to be happy. And if we want to have a little bit of a better glance at this, let's go to tests, reports, and then maybe open up index. Have a little bit of a thing for that. So, oh, there are untested components here. So here our post or our home is not tested, right? The landing page that we created. And we can see our posts have a perfect coverage, right? We can exactly see what kind of code we ran through. I mean, really not that exciting, but our coverage is absolutely perfect. Let's produce an error maybe, so we can kind of like see what would happen if a test would fail, right? So let's just say here I would wrongly assume IDs. I'm running this again, neoan3 test. Okay, and here you see 9 tests, 18 assertions, failures 1. Right, and here I exactly see the output, right? So test get post by IDs, failed asserting that an array has the key IDs, right? So that's exactly the issue. And then this could be now an issue with our test. In that case, we know it is. Or an issue with our, what's it called? With our functionality. And that's on the really high level, how we want to go about it. There are particular mocking things, but I mean, this is not really too much of a how to write unit tests. It's more about like how this is implemented in the neoan3 environment to give you the ability to basically say, hey, this is what you want to run. So from a necessity endpoint, right? What should basically be understood is that Xdebug is something that you probably want to have in order to create those tests accordingly. So be sure that you have that installed, and you want that so you can actually also like listen to particular things. So let's just say I would want to say, hey, I'm interested. Let's actually start listening to this. I'm interested in this breakpoint here, right? So when somebody makes a call, where's my Postman? Boom, then I can accept this incoming call and basically say, okay, so now the code execution stops here. See how this is still running, sending request? Still running, so I can now see, okay, what's coming in. ID is null, params, let's look at that. Okay, some value. This is the complete context, so I can basically debug everything that is here, right? Let's do the next step. No, sorry, step over, and here I'm going outside of this if, so the if did not hit, right? There's no ID, and so here with my ID I can see it here, but or down here I can exactly see what's going on. Okay, and then boom, I let it through and I see the result. So that's definitely something that you want to have. which is for basically debugging a very useful tool, because otherwise you're going to spend a lot of times with your tests and don't really know what's going on. Now, one last thing that you saw here, right, is to say like, well, so all of those tests automatically run, so you have an overall code coverage here, and we're not hitting 90, which is something that we probably want to kind of at least get over with, so we have, it looks good on our repo, right? So let's quickly say, okay, neoan3 new test component home, just so we see if it understands that this is a route component. So if we go to our home test, and here it looks very different, as you can see. So test init, and then it expects a particular output, and that is just doc type HTML. So it expects this to basically return an HTML file, and of course it's true. We know that, right? If we go here and say no, not the API, the actual static rendering, we know that this is basically what's going to happen. This is basically the only test I really need to run here. So I assume that if I were to say neoan3 test, everything would be fine. Yep, everything does look fine. And then I assume that my code coverage, yep, there we go. And now it looks way better, right? And yeah, so that's a little bit of the introduction, and will help you hopefully to write really reliable code, right? So neoan3 is not only a fast way of developing, but also a reliable way of developing, and that's just something that I wanted to show you because I get a lot of questions in that regard. All right, well, thank you so much, and I hope it helped.